Chapter 6. Why isn't everybody irritated by the same things? This sounds like pretty much the same question we asked in Chapter 5, and in a sense it is. But bear with me because there is a significant difference. You will remember that in Chapter 5 we asked the question, why do some triggers make me angry but not other people, and vice versa? And the answer was, because you might appraise and judge the situation one way, and other people might appraise and judge it another way. The question we are really addressing in this chapter, to put it in its fullest form, is why do I appraise and judge a situation in one way, whereas somebody else might appraise and judge it in quite a different way? Beliefs and judgment. So how come you appraise and judge a situation one way, while some other people appraise and judge it in another way? The answer is because of the basic beliefs we have all developed over the years. These beliefs can be of several different kinds. For example, beliefs about how other people are, what the world is like, even about how we compare with other people. Beliefs about how people are meant to behave, how people learn lessons, what's important in life, and so on. Beliefs about how other people would see a particular situation, including possibly how a jury in a court of law would see it. How do these beliefs fit in with the model we developed in the previous chapter? Clearly our beliefs are going to influence our judgment and appraisal of the trigger, our anger, our inhibitions, our feelings of anger, our response. So now our model has another element in it, as shown in Fig 6.1 on page 38. A model for analysing irritability and anger. We start with the trigger. Customer comes into bar, leaves door slightly ajar, and thereby allows cold draft onto another customer. Now we have a new box to the left of the next 4 boxes, which is beliefs. And in the box beliefs, we've got these will stem from your upbringing and experience. And this will lead to your appraisal stroke judgment. Now the appraisal stroke judgment is, he's left the door open deliberately just to wind me up and show me up in front of all the other customers. If I don't react, everybody's going to be laughing behind my back, or worse still, to my face. And this leads to anger. In the box to the left called beliefs, we also have the statement, these have far-reaching effects because you have beliefs about yourself and other people which will affect your appraisal and judgment, anger and how it may be expressed, inhibitions, what responses are legitimate. And these will lead to your anger. They will also lead to your inhibitions and also lead to your response. So though you've got your anger which then leads to inhibitions, which is partially overcome, which then leads to his response, victim jumps to his feet, points finger at man who left the door open and verbally abuses him, we've also got the beliefs that affect the last 4 boxes, other than the trigger. It's probably easiest to see how this works if we go through an example or two. What about the man in the bar, sitting with 2 friends, who finally jumps up and confronts the 5th person who comes in and leaves the door open? How come it was he who jumped up rather than one of his 2 friends? Working through our model, we can see that the trigger was just the same for all 3 of them, so that can't be the difference. What about the appraisal or judgment each of them makes? This will be affected by their beliefs about what other people are like. If one of them believes that people generally are all selfish, who don't care about anyone except themselves, He will probably interpret the situation differently from someone who believes that people are all basically good, though sometimes their goodness needs bringing out. So maybe that was the key difference between Steve, the one who jumped up and confronted the newcomer, and Ben and Chris, who didn't. Now we can move on to our next box marked anger. We can see that primed by his beliefs about people in general, Steve's brain is already more likely to be angry than either Ben's or Chris's, and it will be recommending to Steve that he makes a response in keeping with how he feels. At this stage too, beliefs come into play. If Steve believes that people only learn anything if you give them a good bollocking, then the chances are that his brain will be recommending something different from those of Ben and Chris, who believe for the most part that the only way people learn anything is when they're allowed to sit down and think things through. From here we move on to inhibitions. By now we can see that Steve, who thinks that all people are just selfish, who don't give a damn about anyone except themselves, and that people only learn anything if you give them a good bollocking, is already thinking in terms of a pretty hostile response. But possibly his inhibitions will tone it down. If he believes that you don't show your anger in public, that might keep him under control. Equally, if he believes that if you confront somebody, they are liable to attack you, then that too will restrain him, so long as the person leaving the door open is bigger than he is. On the other hand, if he believes that if somebody deliberately provokes you, then you've got to show them who's boss, this is unlikely to do much to keep his anger in check. Finally then, we come to his response. We can see that beliefs are going to play a part here. If he believes that it's all right thumping somebody but you don't ever use a weapon, his response is clearly going to be of a different order than if he believes that if you're going to pick a fight with somebody, you have to be tooled up. So we can see in this example that the beliefs Steve holds are going to affect him at every stage. And these beliefs are nothing to do with the situation in question. They are beliefs he holds day in, day out. So if Steve wanted to radically alter the way he is, the way he feels, and the way he reacts, he could work on his beliefs, perhaps bring them a bit closer to those of Ben and Chris. We'll see how later on. What about Anne and her 12-year-old in the bath? Anne, you'll remember, got really angry with her daughter because she wasn't tidying her room. Anne's next-door neighbour, Elaine, also has fairly young children, and she has always reacted differently to them in the face of stress. So let's have a look at how our model would compare Anne and Elaine. Again, the trigger or situation would have to be just the same. How would Elaine react if her 12-year-old had been resolutely not tidying her room, and how would this compare with Anne's reaction? Let's have a look at the judgment or appraisal that each would make in the face of this event. Anne's judgment is influenced by the fact that she believes that her daughter deliberately does everything she can to annoy me. Elaine, on the other hand, believes that children don't annoy you deliberately, but they are naturally selfish and only lose that as they get older. Anne, therefore, is inclined to see her 12-year-old's behaviour as deliberate defiance designed to provoke her. Elaine, on the other hand, views her daughter's similar behaviour as a piece of thoughtlessness typical of a child of that age. As a result, Anne is inclined to be angry, Elaine much less so. As a result of this belief, Anne's angry brain is already recommending some kind of angry response. Unfortunately, Anne also believes that you get nowhere by coddling kids, with the corresponding implication that a firm hand, either metaphorically or literally, is what is required. Elaine thinks differently, even when she does get angry, which you'll be pleased to hear she does sometimes. Her basic belief is that children need a good example set for them. So while she doesn't mind confronting issues with her children, and them knowing that she is angry and hearing it in her voice, she does try hard not to shout and scream at them. What about inhibitions? Anne believes that if her neighbours hear her going over the top in terms of shouting or smacking her youngster, they will report her to social services. She says this is one of the main things that makes her able sometimes to control her temper. Elaine believes that it is simply not right to shout and scream at young children. In terms of response, Anne thinks that a good smack never did anyone any harm, while Elaine believes that adults hitting children is simply bullying. Beliefs and behaviour. One of the interesting points raised by the example of Anne and Elaine is that it doesn't matter whether beliefs are right or not, they still influence the behaviour of the person who holds them. For instance, Anne may be correct in believing that kids do all they can to deliberately annoy you, and Elaine may be wrong in believing that children are just selfish by nature and grow out of it eventually. It really doesn't matter who is right and who is wrong, both are heavily influenced by their own beliefs. You sometimes even see the paradoxical situation where Elaine's child may be annoying her quite deliberately, but because Elaine believes what she does, she not only leads a calmer life, but also sets a better example for her child. Let's look at another example, this time involving flirting. Fiona and Graham live on a new housing development, and Graham has quite serious problems with jealousy. Hannah and Ian are another young couple who live nearby. Fiona and Hannah are good friends and are very similar in many respects. Unlike Graham, however, Ian has no problems with jealousy. On several occasions, Graham and Ian have faced more or less the same trigger. From time to time, both couples find themselves at the same party. In fact, very often they will actually all go to the party together. Both Fiona and Hannah are warm, friendly, and extrovert young women who like to have an uninhibited time simply in terms of dancing and feeling the pleasure of having friends around them. Graham and Ian appraise these triggers in quite different ways. Graham believes that if a woman is married, then she shouldn't be showing any interest in any other man, and this is what he perceives Fiona as doing. Ian, on the other hand, believes that it is only natural for women to show an interest in men and vice versa. He simply believes that if you are married, then you shouldn't take it any further than the interest stage. So as a result of the same events, Graham becomes angry, whereas Ian doesn't. Graham's angry brain is recommending to him an angry response, whereas Ian is not. In terms of inhibitions, Graham believes that it is wrong to hit anybody, and certainly somebody you love, so even though angry, he will not respond that way. Interestingly, Ian is not totally averse to getting into fights. He does not believe that it is totally wrong. Fortunately, however, he rarely becomes angry. Graham also believes that if he addresses the issue head-on, then A, Fiona will think he is a wimp for being jealous, and B, this will put a damper on the fun they might have at a future party. In terms of responses, Graham believes it is wrong to hit people, so that is ruled out. He also believes it is undesirable to shout or to address the issue head-on, so he tends not to do this. His beliefs about sulking, however, are not quite so negative, so that is what he tends to end up doing. Ian, on the other hand, believes that sulking is something women do, so even when angry doesn't tend to respond like that. It is clear from these examples that our beliefs can have an all-pervasive effect on us, not just on irritability and anger, but on every aspect of our feelings and emotions. Jealousy, anxiety, depression, anything you care to mention. Beliefs and other people. Once a year, my mother and I go off on 2 or 3 days holiday, just the two of us. My family stays behind and has a bit of respite. A couple of years ago, we found ourselves in Paris, in an extremely nice hotel, which we could certainly never have afforded had it not been for a very special offer at the local travel agent. Anyway, once there, we look around for what to do. Tickets available from the hotel include an evening at the Moulin Rouge, which is, as you know, a kind of review bar for tourists. It looks good, and of all the attractions on offer, it is the only one we have heard of. The only snag is that it is expensive, 900 francs per person for the evening. That's about £80 or $125. However, this, it seems, includes everything: dinner, drinks, review, the lot. So we sign up, and the next evening, off we go. The Moulin Rouge consists of a big stage on which a lot of girls strut their stuff, and an even bigger area where about 5 million tourists eat their dinners at tables crammed more closely together than you have ever seen before. We are given a terrific table right next to the stage, are given complimentary drinks shortly followed by the first course of our dinner, and sit back for a good evening. As the show starts, I notice a very small card sitting on the table, pick it up and just manage to read what it says in the gloom. My hazy brain does a slow translation. Minimum drinks order 600 francs per person. I am stunned. Not only having paid handsomely for our 2 tickets, we are now faced with having to pay another substantial sum for drinks. I am not even sure I have got that much money on me. Everywhere I look, I see 20 stone bouncers and begin to realise the true meaning of the phrase tourist trap. My mother is pretty engrossed in the show. I am feeling sort of nauseous, and even from the inside can tell I must look glazed. The 3rd act finishes and there is a gap before the band starts up to herald the 4th act. At this point I mention, calmly of course, that there is a card on the table that says there is a minimum drinks order of £50 or $85 per person. And this is where beliefs come in. I believe that all big cities are the same, and that if you go to a tourist trap, then you expect to get trapped. My mother, she has had good holidays in France, so quick as a flash she says, "No, it's all right, the French are nice," without taking her eyes off the stage. It is a simple belief, deeply embedded, and has ramifications for 1,001 situations that might arise in France. And thank goodness she was right. The card's strictures didn't apply to us. Not long after the Moulin Rouge experience, I came across another example of an extended version of French people are nice. I was walking along a promenade in a quiet coastal resort, and coming towards me was a man of about 25 who clearly had significant learning difficulties. He had a rucksack which was causing him some trouble. He had managed to get it properly hooked over one shoulder, but the other side was sort of pinning his arm halfway behind him. This posture will be familiar to anyone who has ever tried to put a rucksack on, and it's much more easily sorted out by someone else than by the wearer. So this man simply walked up and stood in front of me without saying a word, and I sorted out his rucksack.